Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of Artillery Workshop, our ongoing series in which we walk through different kind of strategic examinations of various things happening in the world of augmented reality and virtual reality. Today, we're actually going to look at AR and the state of the industry. And this really kind of flows from a recent intelligence briefing that we did, which looked at all of the major tech players and what they are each doing in AR. Looking at that kind of top of the food chain really starts to inform some strategic direction when we look at, what are the motivations of tech giants such as Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, and others. Why are they doing this? And I think answering that question of why can start to inform the how and the when, and then can also just really start to create signals that reveal kind of important directional indicators for the industry, and be better informed about where the puck is going.
So what I'd like to do today is look at several different premises, 5 different premises that we have, starting with the fact that to acknowledge AR and VR to a greater extent has been a bit overhyped. Especially throughout the 2016-2017 hype cycle. But we still believe it's going to be very transformative. It's just a bit early. And I like to compare that to the early 2000s dot-com bubble, circa 2001, when a lot of the exuberance, looking back, wasn't even wrong. In fact, a lot of the market sizing and opportunity estimation was actually underestimated, but it was just early. So I think that where we are right now with augmented reality, and to a lesser extent virtual reality, follows that same pattern. Now, a similar premise, moving on, is that glasses are the end game. That is the fully formed vision of augmented reality. But that still also is a little bit early. We believe though that won't arrive until at least 2020, when Apple, among others, is projected to release their smart glasses, and we're going to go into that in a little bit. Now, right now, in terms of cultural acclamation and in terms of the technology, again, with respect to glasses, we're just not there yet, and they're not sleek enough and small enough for mass consumer appeal and adoption, and it's going to take a few cycles of Moore's Law before that happens. Now, in the meantime, we're seeing a lot of milestones for mobile AR, which is the kind of current opportunity. Apple and Google have significantly advanced that through their respective development kits, which give developers the ability to build AR experiences and apps on commodity hardware, or what I like to call zero-cost hardware, because it's the device you already have in your pocket. They've incentivized developers to do so through a distribution mechanism through app stores, and then more importantly, a large installed base and an addressable market to reach, which today is about 762 million devices that are either AR Core or AR Kit compatible. That's going to grow quickly to about 3.4 billion by 2020, largely as a function of hardware replacement cycle. So the type of hardware required for AR compatibility is going to cycle in pretty quickly. And at that later end of that forecast timeline, the active users, not just the compatible devices, but the more important metric of active users, is going to be just over 1 billion in terms of AR use. Moving on, I think another kind of subset of companies that is largely incentivized by some of those installed base and total addressable market figures are tech giants. When you look at Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, they are very much blitzing this AR opportunity. We actually just put out a report that looks at what they're each doing. And there were a few interesting kind of takeaways from that report. First of all, looking at what these folks are all doing is starting to shine a light on where AR could go, and what the business models are looking like in terms of kind of taking lessons away from that top of the food chain. But also it's very interesting that they're each going about this in vastly different ways. But there's a common thread that their motivations are all to protect or grow or pave the way for their core businesses. So to kind of give some examples, first with Apple, its core business is hardware. It is diversifying to some degree into software and services with things like iTunes and iCloud, but the core business remains hardware, and most moves it makes are to protect or grow that cash cow. And AR is no exception. So there are a few ways it's doing this. One is, in the short term, to use AR to essentially make iPhones sexy again. iPhones over the last several quarters have faced decelerating sales growth, which is bound to happen as any product matures. But also, it's really using AR among a feature set that is trying to make it a more compelling consumer purchase. For example, at its recent hardware event, it really used AR to kind of flex the muscles of some of its higher-end hardware, such as the new A12 Bionic chip, and to really kind of justify the premium pricing of its higher-end phones that it's increasingly rolling out. In this case, the iPhone XS and XS Max. Now, the other thing it wants to do in the short term is simply get AR out there so that consumers will become acclimated to it and really to kind of seed the demand on the consumer side. But on the other side of the equation, on the kind of the supply side, it also wants developers to start to get acclimated to AR and really kind of gain their native footing around building AR apps and experiences and starting that cycle, which tends to take a few years if history is any indication, such as kind of smartphone apps in early years. And that's really pursuant to its longer-term strategy of having all of these things in place before it comes out with its smart glasses. Now, Apple very much sees glasses as the next logical evolution in hardware, in mobile hardware, in terms of developing and delivering information to users through this kind of wearable interface in kind of their line of sight. And it's really betting a lot on that concept. If you look at some of its IP filings, its patent filings, its recent acquisition history, a lot of these signals point towards this is where Apple's going. We and several other industry watchers in the XR space are projecting a 2020 to 2021 timeframe for this release. And again, towards the end of its core business model, which is very hardware based. This is the kind of successor to the iPhone in terms of its revenue growth. So in the medium term, we covered long term and short term. Sort of a dark horse that's somewhere in between the two is what I like to call AR audio. And this is using audio as a modality for delivering informational overlays as opposed to graphics. And really, the thought is that it's kind of an intelligent ambient whisper that guides you throughout your day. It's funny, we always like to joke that the original form of augmented reality was radio, because it augments your perception of the world as you're driving or jogging or whatever you're doing. What we're talking about here is some version of that, but a lot more intelligent. This is already in development in parallel with some of the personal assistant devices and things happening in the AI world with Siri and Google Assistant. And really the use case is, guiding you through your day, everything from walking directions to information on the person you're shaking hands with at a meeting. You could picture someone like LinkedIn developing that app. And that's just it. It's going to require a lot of software development. It's going to require a lot of AI. But the first step towards that goal is really just, seeding the consumer use case of an all-day wearable. And Apple is already doing that. It's already halfway to that goal, if you consider what it's done with AirPods. Google, similar what it's doing with Pixel Buds, although it's a little bit further behind in terms of the sleekness of the hardware. But Google Assistant is a pretty stellar assistant, AI personal assistant device when you compare it to Siri. So it'll be interesting to watch how these companies are battling it out in terms of delivering information to us in this audible modality as opposed to graphical AR. Moving on to Facebook. And again, back to that kind of theme and that construct of, what are the core business models of these companies and how is AR boosting that? So Facebook, its core model involves keeping us in its walled garden for as long as possible, sharing information and other kind of user engagement KPIs it has that builds towards its revenue stream, which is advertising. AR is very much something it's using similar to the way that Snapchat is using it, with AR lenses and selfie masks and other things that provide more compelling and fun and animated ways to share our status or our life events with friends. Now, not only is that something that increases user engagement as an indirect path to its monetization, but it's very much also a direct path in that some of these formats are very advertiser friendly, and these continue to develop. So this is the most recent example. This is a newsfeed ad. It shows up in the newsfeed, targeted through social signals. You can tap on the ad to then activate the front-facing camera to try on that product. In this case, it's a pair of Michael Kors sunglasses. In addition to that product visualization, you can then take the next step down the funnel and actually purchase the sunglasses right there. So it's a full funnel ad format, ad medium, and a lot of advertisers are really starting to latch on to this, and it's showing a lot of positive KPIs. We put out a report recently that maps all of those different kind of campaign performance indicators that are happening so far, and there are some pretty strong ROI signals out there. Here's another example, again with Facebook. Facebook Messenger, it's allowing its advertisers to reach consumers directly through the messaging channel, fans, customers, etc., and activate an AR kind of product visualization tool. In this case, it's Nike Shoe Drop for the latest Kyrie 4 sneakers. Allows you to put a podium with the sneaker right in front of you in your immediate vicinity, and then literally walk around the shoe. It's accurately positionally tracked, dimensionally accurate, and again, you can then go one step further and buy the actual shoe. Moving on to Amazon, very similar in terms of product visualization and commerce as its end game. Amazon really wants AR as a tool to get you to buy more and return less, with the key question of what does it look like? Does it fit? This is working particularly well with large items, home appliances like flat screen televisions, which is a growing category on Amazon. One of the challenges is, though, that it's such a large item that it decimates Amazon's margins when people return them. Amazon, as you probably know, is a company that operates at very thin margins at massive scale. So it's very margin obsessed. So any tool that can help it to, aid that overall goal, and in this case, getting people to see if something fits, it's a more informed purchase, so returns go down, that's something Amazon is very interested in. Moving on to Google. Google's core business, again, that theme of what is the core business, what is the motivational factor here? For Google, that's obviously search. It wants AR to boost search through boosting query volume and query quality and buyer intent by using the camera as an additional search input. And what Google's doing here, it calls visual search. So essentially, point your phone at an item and get information about that item that's delivered on top of that item. So essentially the analogy is the camera is the new search box, and physical world items are the new search terms, and that informational overlay is the new search result. And if you think about it, that is very much aligned with the evolution of Google search over the last several years, where it's moving more towards, especially in the mobile era where there's not enough screen real estate, moving away from the 10 blue links, the search engine result page that's traditionally been there, more towards answering individual questions. So that's the case with its one box results, which increasingly populate search results. It's the case with voice search, and this kind of visual search paradigm is very much aligned with that. Additionally, some of its advantages include that it's very millennial friendly. Millennials love the smartphone camera as a place where they, spend a lot of time and a lot of activity. Additionally, we're talking about very potentially high value searches in terms of that consumer intent. We've been saying for years in the kind of local analyst corps that local searches carry higher buying intent than broadly defined core search, and that can be seen in KPIs such as click-through rates. This carries that same principle of that high buying intent because of the proximity to the item to which you're searching, and then also the immediacy of transacting in these kind of commerce-heavy use cases, such as what you see here on this screen, where it's a local search, finding somewhere to eat right now. So those are the kind of high-value, high-monetizable searches that Google's interested in. Again, a motivating factor for what it's doing here. Speaking of high intent, high buying intent doesn't get any greater than when you're in an actual store, in a retail environment. And that's where Google's VPS comes in, which is kind of an offshoot of visual search. But what it's doing here is working with some of its retail partners like Lowe's to map their store interiors with 3D spatial maps and all their product information to let you find the right products. This not only has a high intent use case for the user, but another benefit for Google is it positions Google at that last mile to the cash register, which has always been kind of a gap in its ability to attribute search marketing effectiveness and report to its advertisers that actual sales are resulting in a kind of offline, tangible fashion. So a big question that remains is kind of what will be the killer app? That's what comes next. We have a lot of other things in place in terms of that progression of developer kits, in terms of an installed base of hardware. All of those things have happened. The next step in that progression, historically speaking, are the killer apps. And speaking of historical kind of evidence, the iPhone killer apps took 2 to 3 years to emerge. The iPhone came out in 2007. It was around 2009 to 2010 we started to see the Ubers and the Wazes and the Foursquares of the world really emerge. And it was really that amount of time that it took for developers to gain that native footing and to really build from the ground up for the iPhone. I think we're going to see that progression in AR as well. And the cool thing is those apps that came out 2009, 2010 were far from what anyone imagined in 2007 when the iPhone first came out, or in 2008 when the App Store came out. So similarly with AR, its killer apps will be far from what anyone imagined in 2017 when ARKit first came out. So that's what we have to look forward to. I think it's going to be an exciting time for the next few years. To really pinpoint what that's going to be and all of those kind of premises and market sizing, how that pans out. It's going to be a moving target, so we'll continue to keep looking at it, examining it, and building videos and articles and reports and other multimedia that does just that. So thank you for listening. I'm Mike Bullen. This has been the latest Artillery Workshop, and we'll be back soon with more.